Okay, if you've never read the Book of Judges, I highly recommend it. Basically, what happened is that the Jewish people were freed from their slavery in Egypt, spent 40 years in the wilderness, and then managed to conquer the Holy Land. And then as soon as Joshua, their leader, died, they, within one generation, they started becoming bad people and falling away from God. And then God sent a judge, or God sent bad things to happen to them, judgments against them. And then a judge came, which is a judge is kind of like a prophet leader person. And a judge would come and led them in to follow God again, and thus freeing them from whatever their oppression was. And this happened over and over and over again throughout the book of Judges. And then, if you keep following through that story, the third king of Israel, considered one of the wisest, if not the wisest man to ever live, was Solomon. And he wrote in his book Ecclesiastes that there's this cycle of life that keeps going over and over and over again. He talks about like a time for war and a time for peace, a time to beat swords into plowshares and a time to beat plowshares into swords. Well, this cycle is continuing over and over again throughout history. It continues throughout the entire Bible, and if you want to read modern books that talk about the history of this cycle after the Bible stops, these two books pick it up, is Pendulum and The Fourth Turning. I'm sorry, I don't know the authors off the top of my head. And then, but what I want to talk to you about is the cycle and what we can do about it. If we're in a good time, we know bad times are going to come. If we're in a bad time, good times are going to come. So in the bad times, we should be rejoicing knowing that the good time is coming. And all we got to do is hang in there until the good times come and rely on God and follow our mission and that God gave us. If we live in a good time, we should be preparing for the bad times. Like Joshua did in the book of Genesis. He knew that the bad times were coming because God gave a dream to the Pharaoh and allowed Joseph to interpret it. So he spent the next 7 years of good times preparing for the 7 years of famine that were coming. And since you know if you live in a good time, that the famine is always going to come, the bad times are always going to come, not necessarily famines. Metaphorical famines. So, if you're living in a good time, you should be getting ready for the bad time. And not just like stocking up on food and water, but building communities and figuring out what your mission is and what your role in the kingdom is. All right, I kind of misspoke there the way I said that God sent punishment to the people of Israel. It's more like he let their natural consequences of their actions hurt them. So, like an alcoholic that drinks too much and knows he's drinking too much will damage his liver. We do the same kind of things in our own life. And right now, not just individually, but as a society. And right now, as a society, we are doing everything we can in order to damage and create weak people that are unable to take care of themselves, men and women. And there's an old phrase that bad times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create bad times. So we know from that phrase, we know from modern books, and we know from the Bible that this cycle continues over and over and over again. So what can we do about it to avoid the bad times? Well, as a society, nothing. You and me, we're not going to be able to wake up enough people and convince them that these bad times are coming in order to stop it. But what we can do is try to be a good example and a good leader and prepare for those bad times and be strong people ourselves and help the other people around us to be strong people in order to mitigate the bad times that do come. So that way, if God allows those natural consequences, or when God allows those natural consequences to happen to the society around us, that we're buffered from it as much as possible by being good, strong people and following Jesus and following our mission and using our skills to build his kingdom the entire time. There's lots of examples of people in the Bible. The prophet Elijah, for example. He was one of only a handful of prophets left in all of Israel, and one of the only few hundred people total in all of Israel that were still worshiping God. And yeah, he went through some bad times, but in the end, he had a great life and got to spend eternity with God and help bring more people towards God. And that's the kind of people we need to be. So thank you for watching, and thank you for joining me on the journey to use God's gifts to grow his kingdom, prepare for the future, and live better lives. Have a great day, and God bless.